I'd appreciate it if you'd send a copy to all the members and indicate that,
Bill, there's nothing to worry about. Everything's going to be just fine. You lost your arm in a car accident yesterday. We've transplanted another arm for you.
How does it feel to have someone else's arm?
Dad, it's sort of gross.
well, that's not how it looks, it's how it works, right? I think there's something the matter with me.
Oh!
It's the arm.
Billy!
What's going on?
There's something wrong with the person he used to belong to.
You have this guy's arm. You don't have his personality.
I want you to run my prints. Any past record I had would show up on the printout, right? You put a killer's arm onto my body and you didn't tell me.
That arm can't do anything you don't want it to.
How do you know that? Where does evil live? Does it live in the soul? In the mind? Maybe it lives in the flesh.
Maybe you got some kind of demon inside of you these days.
Why doesn't anybody want to ask any questions about these operations?
I hit my kid. I tried to strangle my wife. I have nightmares every night. I want this arm off!
Don't you realize what I and my team have accomplished with that arm?
Take the kids and go to your mother's. Don't pack, just go now!
Body parts.
We're making history here.
Hey there folks, I am back yet again to discuss another horror flick. I'm going to be discussing the 1991 body sci-fi horror film Body Parts, and by the tagline it says, "Where does evil live? The heart, the mind, or the flesh?" And right off the bat I definitely enjoyed this flick. It's got very good direction, very intense graphic violence that kind of depicts kind of like the dark nature of, you know, transplants. Can evil be transferred into, limbs, whether it be your arms, legs, and whatnot? It's kind of like the dark nature of the flesh. And from what I understood, this film was actually based on a novel called Choice Cuts. But I'll definitely start with our crew, our technical crew. Our film's director is Eric Red. He also, in fact, wrote the screenplay along with Norman Snider. The story was by Patricia Herskovic and Joyce Taylor. And like I said, the film was based on a novel called Choice Cuts by Pierre Boileau and Thomas, we'll just call him Thomas N. Kind of hard to pronounce his last name. The film was produced by Frank Mancuso Jr. because it was distributed by Paramount Pictures. The cinematography was done by Theo Van de Sande, and the music itself was done by Loic Decker. And I really do enjoy this music because I even have the soundtrack. It's a really great soundtrack, and hopefully I can touch upon it later on my review. And I'll go down to the cast members. Our film's lead actor is Jeff Fahey. He plays Bill Cruikshank, a criminal psychologist. We also have Brad Dourif, who's been in a lot of films like Child's Play, X-Files, Exorcist 3, you name it. He also plays Remo Lacey. We have Kim Delaney as Karen Cruikshank, who is Bill's wife. We have Zakes Mokae as Detective Salchuk. Lindsay Duncan as Dr. Agatha Webb. Paul Van Victor, who appears as Ray Koberg. Peter Murnick as Mark Draper. We have John Walsh as Charlie Fletcher. Not the John Walsh from America's Most Wanted, just so you know. And we have Peter McNeil as a drunk that appears in a bar scene, which I'll definitely touch upon. And then we have Nathaniel Moreau as Bill Jr., Bill's son. And then I believe Sarah Campbell is Samantha, Bill's daughter. And the plot revolves around, Bill Cruikshank, who is a criminal psychologist who undergoes an experimental arm transplant surgery, and then unfortunately on a day when he's on his way to work, he gets into a very horrific car accident, and his body goes through a windshield, and he loses his arm in the process. And at the hospital, he is stabilized, but unfortunately they can't save his original arm. However, Dr. Attica Webb, played by Lindsay Duncan, is able to convince Karen to sign off on an experimental transplant surgery. And when Bill awakens from the surgery, he begins to eventually adjust to his new arm, and he is eventually able to go through the physical therapy and kind of get his arm gets readjusted to it. And we see them go through a little bit of a montage where he's lifting weights, doing some stretches, that sort of thing. He resumes back to normal, and everything seems like everything's going to go back to normal. He even said it, in fact, it works a little better. But then unfortunately that's when Bill starts to see these horrible visions of very horrendous acts of murder, as if he's committing them. He occasionally loses control of the arm. At the prison, Paul Ben Victor's character, where apparently he tries to convince him to maybe trust him, but then when Ray grabs his arm, he then sees that Bill's arm, the new transplant arm, has like a tattoo called Striker, and they only get those on death row pretty much. So as a result, Bill decides he wants to do a little checking on the arm and who originally belonged to. He has a police friend scan his fingerprints, and he is shocked to discover that the arm came from Charlie Fletcher, who murdered about 20 people. And Bill eventually confronts her about that, and she chose not to tell him until he was, well enough beyond the physical therapy. And then eventually Bill discovers there were two other patients, Mark Draper and Remo Lacey, who received, the killer's legs and the other arm. And Bill visits Remo first, and Remo, played by Brad Dourif, he's in the film for, I say, maybe under 10 minutes. But he does a great job with the material he works with. Because Brad Dourif is that good of an actor. He makes his presence known. He even makes a joke whenever Bill said he had the other arm, and he's like, "So you want to arm wrestle?" It gave me a nice, good chuckle right there. So Bill attempts to convince Remo the arm that he got came from a serial killer, and that and the paintings that Remo has been painting were actually Charlie Fletcher's. There's images, like he sees Remo has painted an image where apparently Charlie was snapped a girl's neck, and then he painted an image where basically he killed several cops, and he's basically trying to tell him these are the visions he had. But Remo, basically only caring about his newfound success, he dismisses Bill's warnings about this. Bill eventually meets Mark, tries to warn him as well, but Mark is very fortunate and happy that he can just walk again, and advises Bill to pretty much be grateful and move on. However, Bill's behavior, becomes more erratic and starts to, act more violent. In fact, he actually, there's a scene where he's like having a little rough playing with the son, but he gets rather aggressive and hits him pretty hard, and he also strangles his wife, almost killing her, which then forces Bill to leave, and he lets his children know that he still loves them, but he's going to have to try to figure out what the hell is going on with him and what's really making him do this. He actually visits Dr. Webb again, demanding that she remove the arm, but she refuses to do so, and the problems that he's experiencing are pretty much insignificant compared to the experiment's success, and she would see to that he goes to a mental institution. And there's this really great line where he says, "Let me be so blunt, doctor, why don't you go fuck yourself?" Just really tells her off like that. Bill eventually meets up with Remo and Mark at a bar where they start to, to have their discussions about the surgery. Then apparently a drunken man from the bar recognizes Bill from the news, demands to see the arm. Bill refuses and eventually snaps and actually breaks a bottle over the guy's head, and he engages in a fight, single-handedly taking out several men, almost kills one before being stopped.
Let me see that. Hey.
Then eventually, when Mark returns home, his legs start acting weird. Calls Bill up, and then Bill, who hears Mark yell and struggle with someone, and then eventually Bill goes to Mark's apartment to find him dead and both of his legs missing. And then Bill calls the police and implores the lead detective, played by Zakes Mokae, who actually is the one that captured Charlie Fletcher, who is Detective Salchuk. And for some reason, Salchuk, suspects Bill of foul play, but then eventually, when Remo is attacked and has his other arm taken off because they arrive too late, so eventually he realizes that Bill is in fact the next one. So as Bill and the detective, since Bill is inside the police car, just right alongside of him, Charlie pulls up in the car beside him and just slams on the handcuffs to Bill's wrist, and Charlie speeds away, and the detective has to do his best to catch up. It's a very intense sequence, but very well shot. He's trying to prevent Bill from getting his arm ripped off, which is what Charlie is trying to do. But eventually, Bill is able to grab the detective's gun and shoot off the handcuffs. And then, when the detective attempts to open fire, Bill decides to steal the car away and pursue the killer. And for some odd reason, it's revealed that apparently Agatha Webb and Charlie are working together because he brings the limbs back to Dr. Webb. And pretty much Bill, writing some last little notes in his diary, decides he's going to confront Dr. Webb. And he has a gun armed. He finds Charlie's torso and limbs in a glass case, kind of like they're twitching and wiggling as if they have a mind of their own. And then, of course, Dr. Webb appears and is ready to take the arm back. And then Charlie sneaks up behind him, knocks Bill out. And while Bill is, strapped on an operating table, somehow Bill is able to break awake from the attempted. I think they used some kind of gas to put him to sleep, but he's able to somehow overcome that. And eventually, Bill knocks out Dr. Webb. The restraints, of course, knocks her out, and wrestles with Charlie for the shotgun, snap his neck, destroys the glass case, shoots at all of the Charlie's body parts that were wiggling. Charlie's still alive, he actually ends up arming himself with the detective's gun, but he ends up accidentally killing Dr. Webb, and then Bill the shotgun and shoots Charlie in the head, killing him for good. Bill's in the park. He has his journal. He's writing down notes about after Charlie's death. He notes he has not had any problems with the arm after Charlie's death. He's still thankful for Dr. Webb and Charlie, but he ends up, ending on the note that says, "I want it, Charlie, fair and square." And that's pretty much your ending right there. So what I would definitely like about this film overall is that it's the plot. I like the fact that it explores the dark nature of things. It's got a very good lead in Jeff Fahey. He does a really great job. You kind of feel for the poor guy, especially for that horrific accident. He gets this new arm as an opportunity, but then he finds out that it belonged to a serial killer. He decides to do his own investigations. Is what I like. He tries to attempt to warn the people that receive the transplants, but they kind of brush it off. Although eventually they start. Well, Mark, attempts to, start to realize something, but unfortunately it's too late when Charlie is revealed to be alive. So what I like is that it's it's got some interesting, graphic violence and gore. Got some good acting by Jeff Fahey. The music itself by Loic Decker, it's very unnerving and creepy. It really hits on all the right notes, especially in the very opening sequence. I like how the music, reveals the limbs of Charlie. It really shows just how kind of bombastic the score is. It definitely has a very distinctive theme. I like how it just fits the film like a glove. There's no question about it. And even though Brad Dourif is not in the film for a whole lot, the fact that he's able to make a great performance out of the limited screen time that he has, it's definitely a standout performance for sure. And the makeup effects, the way the limbs are ripped off, and the accident sequence, that was very well shot and edited. And like I said before, the opening of the film, it definitely has a very just bombastic feeling of darkness and just horror. It definitely just works. And you got good actors, you got good prosthetic effects, great score, memorable lines of dialogue. Like those images, they just come to me, man. And like I said before, there's a line where Jeff Fahey's character tells Brad Dourif's character, where I got the other arm, and he's like, so you want to arm wrestle? And you see this? This is paint. How about it? Everyone's a fucking painter. And the bar scene in general, the way it was shot and the way Bill just reacts violently when he's trying to defend himself, when he doesn't want to show the guy the arm that he has transplanted. And yeah, it's a very well shot sequence, pretty intense. And then the part where Charlie starts to reclaim the limbs and just rip them off like they're nothing. The guy that portrayed Charlie Fletcher, he doesn't really have much. I don't think he has any dialogue, but they do a great job. And there's also a really impressive sequence whenever Bill is getting in the surgical room, where he's being gassed up so he can have the arm transplanted onto him. They actually show a scene where apparently Agatha Webb is removing the head. Pretty intense and graphic shot right there. I think the only problem I had with this film was maybe the wonky editing, because right after the bar scene ended and when Mark was trying to stop Bill from doing any more damage to any other people, apparently Bill actually punched him, and then all of a sudden Mark kicks them in the very next scene, like right after Detective Salchuk comes in. The very next scene, it just cuts to Mark arriving at his apartment and he's struggling with his legs. I felt that was a bit odd and just kind of wonky editing. I think that was the problem I have with it. And as much as Kim Delaney gave an okay performance, she really doesn't do a whole lot. She is told to leave, get the kids and leave and tell them to go somewhere safe for a while after Mark Draper dies. Then eventually she's seen at the very end of the film, reunited with Bill after killing Charlie and not having any more unexpected visions or problems with the arm. That's the last you pretty much see of her. So there wasn't a whole lot I didn't like. Just the editing was a bit wonky, but other than that, it's very well acted. You got great prosthetic effects. You got a great score by Loic Decker. Good direction, especially for the actions, the little sequence with the accident with Bill, and then the scene whenever Charlie pulls up to Bill and handcuffs him. That's a very intense scene. It was very well shot, where basically it's a cop car and a serial killer, having the handcuffs to try to get his arm back. It's just intense, and I don't think this clip can speak more than itself right there. That's a very well directed and good action sequence, for a horror thriller, and for the film's budget, which was, from what I read, it was $10 million. That's a very impressive sequence for the director. And going on to the Blu-ray, which I wanted to discuss, this has the original theatrical cut, of course. It did actually have a couple of deleted scenes where it actually showed a little more graphic violence. Like right after Bill had his accident, it showed that the arm, Bill's original arm, was in front of him. It was still twitching, but eventually it got ran over by the semi. And then there was another scene where you see a little more in the surgical room where they take Charlie Fletcher's arm, and then they're about to reattach it to Bill. Those are really the only 2 deleted scenes on there. Would have been nice if they put them back in there, but it is what it is. It does have a new audio commentary with director Eric Red. It does have new interviews with Eric Red, actor Paul Ben-Victor. I could have swore I think the actor that played Mark was interviewed on here. I could be wrong. I haven't watched this in a while. But it does have an interview with editor Anthony Redman. So yeah, you got a good amount of features on the Blu-ray here. I don't think there were any on the previous DVD, but if you haven't gotten the Blu-ray, you definitely should get it. Definitely worth getting the film if you're a big fan of this or you're just curious to check it out. I definitely would recommend it. I don't know what else to say, like I haven't said before. It has everything you want if you like a bunch of gore, violence with a little bit of action. This movie is definitely for you, for sure. And it's definitely worth giving a look if you're just curious about it. But anyway, I think that's going to do it for me. I admit, I'm a little bit tired, but I did my best to give my review for this film. It's after 12, and I should probably get going. But hopefully you like this review. Feel free to comment, like, share, the normal stuff. And to be honest, I don't know when I'm going to do another review. If I do have something at the end of this, it's not going to be for a good while. So yeah, I just want to let you know on that. So stay tuned for my next review for whenever I decide to do it, and I'll see you later. See ya.
He's a hard-working, dedicated, no holds barred.
Sleazebag bounty hunter.
Relax.
We need you. This is a flashpoint situation.
I've been waiting to kill him for a long time. But this time, it's not business.
Nikki?
That bullseye's back.
Would you do what we're doing to the power?
Who the hell do you think you are? You can use me as bait.
Rutger Hauer. Wanted, dead or alive.
You're losing your bait.